The Week with Ben Ellis.
This is Switch.
It's The Week with me, Ben Ellis, here on Switch Radio on this Sunday afternoon. Now, gambling is a male activity in which women should not or do not take part. This perception has resulted in women experiencing greater harm because of gambling, as they may be reluctant to seek the support they need, according to a report published earlier this week. Gamcare, the country's largest provider of support and treatment for gambling-related issues, has released the first report from its pioneering women's programme, and it outlines worrying trends amongst women who are being harmed by gambling. I'm joined on the line right now by the Chief Executive of Gamecare, Anna Hemmings. Anna, good afternoon.
Hello there, you're right.
I'm good. Yeah. Well, it's it is a bit of a perception and a stigma, not for myself, as I'll explain in a moment, but yeah, a lot of people do think that gambling is a man's world, but that just isn't true, is it?
No, not at all. I think it's the traditional perception of the bookmakers, and if you walk past and look in the window, you would probably see a number of men in there. But actually, there's many forms of gambling available, and of course, women gamble as well. Just the same as men might. But also, women are sometimes affected by someone else's gambling too. So if there's gambling going on in the household, and there might be, lack of money or family impacts and so on, and women feel those. And it's important that in that position they seek help as well, not just if they're gambling themselves.
How long has Gamcare been around?
So Gamcare's been around for over 20 years now. It started in the late 90s. And over that time, we've worked a lot to reduce gambling-related harms. And we operate the National Gambling Helpline, which gets around 40,000 calls a year. And I guess this women's programme that we've been running is born out of the fact that we have a lot more male callers than female callers, and we wanted to get underneath that and understand what women's experience is in respect of gambling. And that's what's really led to this piece of work, where we're trying to amplify women's voices and also work with women's organisations and other professionals to raise awareness of the issue.
So I worked in the gambling industry for the best part of 10 years for two of the major high street bookmakers. And I've got to be honest, yes, the majority of customers were men, and they were men, I'd say, aged between anything between 30 and 80. But we had our fair share of women customers as well. And it wasn't just that, they had to go on the football and they had to go on the horses. We had a bingo game that was running every 5 minutes, which we had a lot of female customers for that as well. But it's interesting with Gamcare as well that the facility is there for people who feel that their gambling is getting ahead of them. How many sort of referrals do you get from people who have referred themselves to Gamcare, or is it the majority of the referrals you get from health, doctors, that kind of thing?
Actually, the majority at the moment come forward themselves, I guess, because we've got the helpline that's running 24 hours a day, year round, via voice and live chat. People seem to find us that way. What we're encouraging other professionals to do is to talk about the issue, because when we're talking to women's organisations or GPs or other health and social care services, it's not so much that they don't want to talk about gambling, it's just not on their agenda. It's something that is quite sort of secretive sometimes in society. And the work that we do with other professionals is about really raising their confidence to have the conversation, because as soon as you raise the issue, it just opens up the conversation and encourages people to talk.
Something that isn't quite so widely known probably within British society is if you go back to, and I've mentioned this on this programme before, having worked in the industry myself, if you go back to 2007, September the 1st, 2007, that was the day that gambling opened to the massive in terms of point of sale advertising and television advertising and sponsorship. It effectively took over everything that tobacco was being advertised and sponsored, because that was seen as bad, and it was seen as you could see the health problems physically that the tobacco and smoke was causing, but gambling not so. But the government still needed to bring in their tax revenue from somewhere, so it went from tobacco and it went to gambling. Have we seen since 2007, because that was the deal, wasn't it? The government said to the bookmakers and the gambling industry, you can essentially do what you want now in terms of drawing your customers in, but you have to make sure that you take care of them. You have a duty of care to look after your customers. And one of the things we said and we did was we had leaflets for Gamcare. Have you seen in the past 13 years that kind of open up in the way that the gambling industry's opened up?
Well, it's really interesting you say that, because you're right that the Gambling Act from 2005 came into effect in 2007. And actually the rates of people experiencing gambling problems, the indications are that's remained relatively stable despite this significant change that we've seen over the years, because back in 2007, the internet was definitely not what it is now. So so that is very interesting, and what we have seen more people coming forward for support over the years, and it does increase year on year. But actually, the overall proportion of people with gambling problems that do come forward is low compared to other concerns that we might talk about. So compared to drink or drugs or whatever, fewer gamblers come forward for treatment, and I think that's because it is still quite a hidden problem, because it's a behavioural issue, perhaps, or because of stigma, or especially for women, the guilt that they experience about these things as well, seem to make it quite difficult for people to seek support. And the other thing about gambling is that you can become very isolated. There's no obvious outward signs, so people are quite often increasingly separate from their family, increasingly preoccupied with gambling, and increasingly obviously losing money as well and having the financial impact. And it can be really hard to get out of that. People feel very isolated and stuck in that situation. So by promoting the conversation, it just really helps those people to pick up the phone when they need to.
Mentioned in 2007, and when gambling advertising obviously exploded onto our screens. I don't want to make any kind of generalizations here, but have you seen more referrals over that time from women since then, due to we always see adverts for bingo on tablets and things like that? Have you seen it take more of a hold with women there, or is it just the same number that went into betting shops and casinos and playing slot machines?
Well, the number of women coming forward has gradually increased over time, and as the number of men has too, actually. But women, we do see gamble online more so than men do. That does seem to be the easier point of access for women. I guess it may feel more comfortable than walking into a betting shop, or it may just be convenient because it's, obviously it's available at home all the time. So women are seeking help a bit more, but it's really important as well that women seek help if they're affected by someone else's gambling, because that can have huge impacts at home that women sometimes bear the brunt of. And there's lots of help and support available if they're in that situation as well, if they're affected by someone else's gambling, and lots of ways they can partly make their own situation more manageable, but also encourage the person gambling to seek support themselves.
Yeah, just a story on the domestic situation from my day in the shop. I had a regular customer on first name terms with him. He got wind that his wife was shopping in the high street, and he literally hid in the toilets until he'd got word that she was out, because he didn't want her to know that he was in the bookie. So you're there in a kind of you are working, but you are in a kind of a social environment with your customers, but you do wonder what it must be going through your customers and their minds, families, when they leave the shop and when they go home.
Yeah, and that's a really good example actually of how when people are being sort of secretive about their behaviours, it begins to erode the trust in relationships, because if that's happening in your relationship, for example, you wonder why your partner's never there, or why there's never any money, and you don't necessarily fully understand what that's about. But it makes people start to question things, and it erodes the trust, and that can be quite difficult in households, as you can imagine.
Yeah, we had a time where we had to push these the equivalent of a points card. So every pound you spend, you get a point, and on the bottom of your betting slip was your latest points total. We see it with supermarkets and stuff, and we had a hard time convincing a lot of customers to sign up to the card, because their partners go through their pockets when they're going to do the laundry, and they would see the points total at the bottom of the slip, and it would cause a lot of arguments at home. So that's just another example. We see, Anna, a lot of the time. Well, we see it every time because we have to. The slogan "When the fun stops, stop," for all of the betting companies, and there's the yellow banner in the windows of all kind of gambling establishments. Do you think the industry is doing enough regarding this, or is it just paying lip service because they have to put that signage up?
Well, I'm sure that the industry have talked a lot about safer gambling measures that they're putting in place, but that's really for them to manage. As a charity working in the treatment and support sector, for us, it's really about our services being available, visible, open for business, and encouraging people, obviously, to come forward for help if they need it. But what precedes that almost is having that conversation about gambling in households, in society, in communities, and getting it out there in a way. I sometimes liken it to the mental health conversation, that if you went back 5 years, we talked about mental health and well-being much less, and we've got much better at doing that, and it's much more acceptable to say you're struggling, and that's a good thing. And I think similarly with gambling, we need to talk about, what our gambling culture's like, and open up the idea that it's fine to seek help if it's getting a little bit out of hand.
Of course, the service is open to all, but for the purposes of the report that was published this week, if there's any women who are listening to this who feel that gambling, not as you said, not necessarily their gambling, but the gambling of their partner is having an effect, and they think this is a service that could appeal to them, how would they get in touch with Gamcare?
So a great first starting point is the National Gambling Helpline, which is available on 0808 80 20 133, free to call 24 hours year round. Or go to gamcare.org.uk, where you can pick up our live chat if you'd rather do it that way. Or there's lots of resources, forums and chat rooms that you can have a look at there as well. And
just on the report from that was published this week, do you think you've achieved, well, not necessarily you, but the industry or the sector or just society in general have achieved to raise the awareness that gambling affects women, not necessarily as much as men, but certainly more than people may have believed it did?
Well, I think we've done some great work, which we're very proud of. We've reached over 3,000 professionals in the year to train them and skill them up around gambling. We've reached lots of women directly, and we've hopefully raised awareness of the conversation. But don't get me wrong, the job's not done. It's something that needs to continue and grow over the coming years. But this is a great starting point for us, I think.
Anna Hemmings, Chief Executive of Gamcare, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.
For more great videos from the week, make sure you subscribe to our channel. It's down here somewhere. And don't forget, you can catch us on the radio every Sunday between 12 and 2 on FM across Birmingham, 107.5, on mobile, on DAB and online. We're made for Birmingham. This is Switch Radio.